It is the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Radio Show on 860 AM WNOV and W293CX 106.5. Wherever you may be listening, however you may be listening, whether through those particular stations, the TuneIn app, the Simple Radio app, the website, the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com, or anywhere in between. We are live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Beside me, I am your host, Joy Baird. Beside me is my wife, co-host, best friend, and gardening partner,
Holly Baird.
The WisconsinVegetableGardener.com is your destination for all things gardening, now containing over 1,000 garden videos, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and a whole lot more. And with that being said, we're going to cover today a topic that a lot of people are not that familiar with, or they're familiar with it for maybe the wrong perception. Fermentation.
Not the wrong perception.
Well,
I think just what they know.
Okay, fermentation to the average person, fermentation, you would think wine or beer.
Right, typically.
Mm-hmm. But there's a whole nother realm of fermentation that is good for your gut and all that health benefits that you can do with vegetables you're getting out of the garden right now, or you're buying fresh from the farmer's market.
Right.
So let's go over what is fermentation.
First, there might be you might know of some commonly fermented foods that you may not be aware of that you are
eating on a regular
basis, and that typically is sauerkraut. That's a Wisconsin favorite with your brat, your Polish or whatever you're eating, and then kimchi. A lot of people like kimchi. It's becoming more popular, and yogurt. Those are commonly fermented things.
And you can do all of those in your kitchen if you have the right tools and you understand the procedure.
Right.
But we were not going to get really into the procedure process of it. We're going to explain the some of the other things that go along with it.
So fermentation consists of transformation of simple raw materials into a range of value-added products with the utilization of the phenomenon of growth of microorganisms and their activities on various substrates. So basically, lacto-fermentation is a microbial process using beneficial bacteria, including lactobacillus, which is a popular, well-known one. A lot of times if you look at your yogurt, it'll say lactobacillus on it.
And these are beneficial.
Right, beneficial bacteria, and other lactic acid bacteria, which is also known as LAB, which is the probiotics, which thrive in an anaerobic fermenting environment.
Okay, well, let's anaerobic. That means lack of oxygen?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Basically, that's what
So you're cutting off the oxygen to allow it to break down on itself to do the fermentation.
Right. But it's also picking up the bacteria from the air as well. So it's
in that container.
But it's the good bacteria. So you're letting the good bacterias work for you.
Okay. Now, I do want to make people aware that if you do go venture on doing fermentation, you're going to have there's going to be problems. You're going to have some fermentation procedures not come out right.
Right. And I want to say that if you see mold on any of your fermented situations, you definitely
don't cut it off. Don't pour it. Don't take that part out and eat the rest. Get rid of the whole deal. Start completely over.
Yeah.
Because there's something that did not jive right during that procedure.
And you want to start small, or you could also take a class. Like I took a class through the Milwaukee Rec Department about fermentation, and I believe the fall catalog is out now, so you can take a look. I don't know if there's any classes listed there or not, but that's definitely something to look into. We've done anything from
isn't fermentation just like basically the pickles in the crock? Isn't that a level of fermentation?
Yeah.
It's not really pickling. Well, it's pickling. It's
a different type of pickling
versus putting in the jar in the water bath can, that type of thing.
So if you had a mom or grandma or whoever that did pickles in the crock, that's a type of fermentation.
And that's a technique in itself. There's a little more technique to that than just putting them in a jar of water bath and sealing them up and let them sit on the shelf.
Right.
Okay. Now, what is it pretty much anything that we can ferment, or is there limitations to, vegetable-wise? Obviously, you're not probably, we're not going to get into the fermentation of like fish and meat and stuff like that.
No, that's kind of different. But
there are cultures that do that and do that very, very successfully. Right. We just never practice that level.
So people do things like fermented salsas. They do fermented different spreads. Chop up their vegetables, let them ferment. There's a vegetable mix that's very popular in Chicago. I can't think of it. It has it's like an Italian mix, usually with cauliflower, peppers, cucumbers, and people make that fermented.
Okay.
So there's different things that you can do. Basically, what you're doing is you're making a brine with water and salt. and that combination will help preserve the food and encourage it to last longer and also get that fermented quality. And then you're adding different spices as well.
Now, when you're fermenting, and can you ferment, is it just one item per container, or can you intermingle, let's say, lettuce and cauliflower and broccoli and a hodgepodge of things?
I don't think I would ferment lettuce. It probably wouldn't hold up to it. But you would, you can do multiple things. So if you want to do like eggplant, tomatoes, onions, and make some sort of fermented mix like that, you could certainly do that.
So when we do the fermentation, what is some of the biggest mistakes people make besides trying to do too much at once?
One thing is some people don't add enough salt. They think, okay, this recipe reads for 4 cups of salt, I need to add 4 cups of water, I need to add 2 tablespoons of salt. That seems awfully high. But that salt acts as a preservation and helps the fermentation process work. If you then, in turn, when you taste the fermented food and taste too salty, you can certainly rinse it off. That does help. It's something that you have to kind of adjust your taste to.
What time frame are we looking at? Or is some of this like weeks, months, or I mean, some of the Asian fermentation, they leave them in crocks for like years and decades, based on their culture and their education of the fermentation procedure.
Well, it really depends on what it is.
Okay.
If you're doing like a pint jar of something, it could be anywhere from 3 days to a week. If you're doing a whole crock, that's going to take more time.
And crocks can be anywhere from a gallon to what, like 15, 20 gallons?
Yeah.
The big crocks.
One thing I also want to mention is you are putting these in a
environment.
Well, an environment that consists of, you want to be continually about the same temperature, about room temperature, so about 65 to 70 degrees.
So not like in the attic or in a spare bedroom that's not heated or cooled.
Right.
Okay.
And then you want to keep them away from direct sunlight.
Because
so a lot of people,
it can mess the procedure up inside the jar.
A lot of people put you probably want it to be more like 70 to 75 degrees, but a lot of people put them like on top of their fridge if they don't have direct sunlight there. We keep ours on our counter because it doesn't have direct sunlight and it stays pretty consistent with temperature.
Now, another problem a lot of people have is they've done all the steps correctly, and they've got 4, 5, 6 different jars going, and they kind of all go bad.
Right. So one thing you want to do, especially because you can even do like a sourdough starter, make your own sourdough bread. You can do your own yogurt. It's more of a traditional yogurt, not the type of yogurt that you would buy in the store. It's still good, but it's a different type of yogurt. Another one is milk kefir, which is basically like a yogurt, but it's a dairy product.
Now, with some of these, you have to buy what is called a starter.
You can buy a starter, yes, and then you can keep reusing that starter as well. So you take a portion of the original product, or for kefir, you use the grains, and then you keep reusing them as you make more.
But the gases that is released can affect other things next to.
Definitely.
Okay.
So if you say you're doing some kefir and you're trying to do some fermented pickles or something, you might want to keep them separate so that they don't affect each other.
Because we've had that problem before. We were, what was it, Jerusalem artichoke fermentation, Jerusalem artichokes, and then pickles, and there was something else, and they kind of all went bad at the same time because they were sitting next to one another, and it's just weird that the gases react to one another and mess things up.
And another thing I want to mention is we made our own, well, it was with pears, but it's essentially the raw apple cider vinegar, but we use pears. And that's something you can do. You can take your pear scraps, your apple scraps, and you can ferment them, and you can make your own vinegar.
Right, and we've done that. And now you can't do that with all. You can do that with apples, and you can do that with pears, and you can do that with pineapple.
Yes.
But you just can't go any vegetable or fruit, throw it in a jar, and do that procedure. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
It is a long procedure.
And you're adding sugar, you're adding the original
Fruit.
fruit, and then you're letting it sit over time. And it is quite a process. I think it takes like 3 or 4 months.
Right, and based on the jar, the size, all of that goes along with it. Now, with that, it is an incredible procedure. It's fresh. It's so nice to have. I mean, we kind of went crazy last year and made 5 gallons of pear.
Yeah, but we've used it.
Right. We've used it.
I mean, not all 5 gallons, and we've given some away, but we've definitely found uses for it.
Right. So you can do that. You can make your own vinegar. But if you're going to use vinegar for canning, you don't want to use the vinegar that you started with.
No.
Or you made.
Yeah. So you don't want to use your own homemade vinegar. You definitely want to use store-bought because of the acidity level in the store-bought is going to be consistent at the correct consistency that you need as opposed to your own.
There is a way, if you make your own vinegar through the fermentation process, in which you can test to make sure it's right percentage. It's just easier to go buy the El Cheapo stuff you got at the bottom of the shelf, or the cheap stuff at the store.
Right.
So fermentation, it's a procedure. Now, does it work just canning jars and crocks, or is there other devices that can
Most
be
people
used?
just use canning jars and crocks, and then you can buy these little airlock lids so that you can make sure the correct gases escape but keep the I guess the bad things out. Some people buy like fermentation weights. Or
It's recommended to do the airlock.
Yeah, I think for me it's been more consistent that way.
Right. So, well, if you've never fermented, we encourage you maybe to check that out. We've got a lot of videos on the website for that. If you're in the Milwaukee or surrounding areas, just tune your radio to 860 AM or FM 106.5. You can also find links on our Facebook pages, The Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener and Home Canning. Our website, thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com, click on the radio tab at the top of the page, then click on the Listen Live button, and you'll have immediately access to our live program. Mobile devices work very well also. Go to your app store and download for free the TuneIn app or the Simple Radio app. Then search WNOV 860, save it to your favorites, and you can have access to our radio show live wherever you're at in the world. Our radio program will also have podcast replay under the radio tab several days following the live broadcast. You can find all of these links in the show notes below. Our show airs 9 to 10 a.m. Central Standard Time every Saturday, March through the end of October. And we want to thank our sponsors because without them, this would not be anywhere possible. You can find all of their links under the radio tab on our website at thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.
For more information, please visit thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.